Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you could explain something you've been wrestling with quietly, maybe for months, maybe for years. Have you ever had a season in life where it felt like you were doing everything you were supposed to do? Yet nothing seemed to work. You put in the effort, you showed up, you stayed strong, you tried to think positively, but somehow things kept slipping through your hands like sand. It's almost as if you were building something brick by brick, and then a sudden storm came and tore it all down in one night. And in those moments, you ask yourself questions you can't always say out loud. What more am I supposed to do? Why isn't this working? Why do I feel like I'm carrying all of this by myself? You smile in front of others, you say you're fine. But deep down, there's this weight, a pressure to hold it all together, to fix what's broken, to push through even when you're exhausted, afraid, or quietly overwhelmed. And maybe, just maybe, you're trying to hold on to something that you were never meant to carry alone. This isn't about failure. This isn't about weakness. This is about that quiet, invisible burden many of us live with. The burden of believing we have to manage life entirely in our own strength. That somehow, if we just work harder, plan better, and stay tougher, we'll eventually get the outcome we're praying for. But what if the very reason you're stuck isn't because you're doing too little, but because you're doing too much on your own? There's a truth that's easy to overlook but impossible to live without. It's simple to say, but hard to practice. And yet, when we embrace it, it changes everything. Put it in God's hands. You see, many of us say we trust God, but we treat Him like a backup plan, someone we run to after we've exhausted our own ideas. We pray, yes, but sometimes our prayers are wrapped in panic, not peace. We say, God, take control, while still gripping the wheel as tightly as ever. But God isn't asking you to partner with Him out of fear. He's inviting you into rest, not rest from responsibility, but rest from control. Because the truth is, you're not in control. You never were, and deep down you know that. You've seen how unpredictable life can be, how fast things can change, how fragile even the best laid plans can become. Yet God is never caught off guard. He's never overwhelmed. He's never late. And He never, ever asks you to carry what only He can handle. When you release something into God's hands, you're not abandoning it. You're placing it where it belongs. You're saying, Lord, I've done what I can. Now I trust You to do what only You can. That kind of surrender doesn't come easily. It requires humility. It requires faith. And it often requires us to let go of timelines, expectations, and the illusion that we're in charge of outcomes. But listen, the moment you truly place something in God's hands, something shifts, not just around you, but inside you. Suddenly, you're no longer walking in circles of anxiety. You're no longer crushed under the pressure to figure everything out. You're no longer trying to force what can't be forced. Instead, you're resting in the truth that God is good, God is wise, and God is able. And what He can do with what you give Him is far greater than what you could ever do by holding onto it yourself. So I'm asking you, not with judgment, but with compassion, what are you still gripping tightly today? Is it your future, your career, a relationship, a decision that's tearing you in two? What if today you made a different choice? What if you stopped striving just long enough to say, Lord, I trust You with this. I'm placing it in Your hands. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to see the whole path. You just have to take the first step, and that step is this, surrender. Because when you truly put everything in God's hands, you begin to see results, not always immediately, not always the way you expect, but always the way that leads to peace. And maybe that's what your heart has been waiting for all along. When people hear the phrase, put everything in God's hands, it often sounds nice, comforting even, but too vague to apply in real life. It can seem like one of those spiritual sayings people repeat in tough times, not fully understanding what it really requires. But there's more to it, much more. And until you grasp the true meaning of what it means to surrender, you'll continue to feel like you're walking in faith, but standing still in life. So let's slow down and talk about it. Not just the phrase, but the heart behind it. To put everything in God's hands is not a one-time statement. It's not a passive hope that maybe, somehow, things will just magically work out. No, it's a daily, intentional, deeply personal act of trust. It's not just words, it's a posture of the heart. It means choosing, sometimes hour by hour, to believe that God is more capable of handling your life than you are. That's hard for us to accept, isn't it? Because we've been taught to solve things, to analyze, to plan, to fix, to push, to perform. We've been taught that results come from action, that if we don't keep control, we lose control. And so we cling tighter and tighter, to people, to plans, to problems, thinking that if we hold on long enough, everything will fall into place. But that's not surrender. That's fear disguised as responsibility. True surrender is not weakness. It's not giving up or stepping back and saying, "Oh well, I guess I'll just let whatever happens, happen." That's resignation, not trust. Surrender is courageous. It says, "God, I'm still showing up. I'm still moving forward, but I'm no longer doing it from a place of fear or control. I'm doing it from faith." It's the quiet strength that chooses obedience over outcomes. It's praying, not to get God to do what you want, but to align your heart with what He knows is best. And here's the part that might sting a little, but stay with me. Surrender isn't just about handing over the hard things. It's about handing over the good things too. We often come to God with our problems, the crisis, the breakup, the job loss, the diagnosis, and that's good. We should. But true surrender also means placing your dreams, your success, your plans, and even your talents into His hand. It means saying, "Lord, I give you the future I want, the path I think I need, and the version of life I had in mind." That's not easy, because deep down, we all have a version of how we thought things would go. And surrender means laying that version at His feet and trusting that even if His way is different, it is always better. God doesn't ask for surrender to punish us. He asks because He loves us too much to let us settle for what we can control. He has more, He sees farther, He knows the weight you carry, and He knows it's crushing you, slowly and silently. That's why He invites you to release it, not because you're failing, but because you were never meant to carry it alone in the first place. Let me tell you, there's peace in surrender, not the peace that comes from having all the answers, but the peace that comes from knowing you don't have to. When you truly put something in God's hands, you're not saying, "I give up." You're saying, "God, you are greater, you are wiser, you are enough." And in that moment, your soul finally breathes, the anxiety lifts, the pressure to perform fades, you start to move differently, think differently, live differently. You stop praying for perfect circumstances and start praying for perfect trust. You stop asking, "When will this be over?" and start asking, "What are you trying to teach me here?" That's what real surrender looks like. And when you begin to live that way, you start to see God's hand in places you never expected. In the delays, in the detours, in the things you thought were falling apart, but were actually falling into place. Surrender isn't a loss, it's the beginning of everything real. So yes, put everything in God's hands. But now you know what that means. It means opening your hands, loosening your grip, and trusting the one who never needed help to hold the universe in place. He can handle your life. He's just waiting for you to let go. Let's be honest with ourselves. Most of us want to be in control. We feel safer that way. We think clearer when we feel like we're steering the wheel, charting the course, calling the shots. There's something deeply human about wanting to manage outcomes, predict the future, and avoid pain by planning everything down to the smallest detail. And it's not always out of pride. Sometimes it comes from a good place, responsibility, care, concern, even love. You want to protect your children, provide for your family, plan for your future, and solve your problems before they grow too big. So you think, if I can just get ahead of it, if I can stay organized, if I can be strong enough, smart enough, prepared enough, maybe it won't fall apart. But here's the truth: control is an illusion. We spend so much of our lives trying to hold things together, trying to keep people happy, trying to prevent mistakes or failure, and in doing so, we exhaust ourselves emotionally, mentally, even spiritually. And yet, life still slips through the cracks. Why? Because no matter how hard you try, you are not in control of everything. You never were, and that's not a failure. That's reality. Life is unpredictable. One phone call can change everything. One diagnosis, one lost job, one unexpected move, one broken relationship. And suddenly all your plans, all your effort, all your structure is shaken, and you realize with painful clarity that you were never as in control as you thought. That realization can either break you, or it can free you, because if you're not in control, and God is, then maybe the goal isn't to try harder to hold it all together. Maybe the goal is to learn how to trust the one who holds it all perfectly in place. See, the illusion of control isn't just exhausting, it's dangerous. It pushes God to the sidelines. It makes you think, even subconsciously, that his role is optional, as if you're the builder and he's just the backup crew in case something goes wrong. And without realizing it, you begin to live like God is your assistant, not your shepherd, and the weight of that mindset, it's crushing. You lie awake at night thinking about what might happen. You carry anxiety over things you can't fix. You rehearse conversations, reanalyze decisions, replay the past, and overplan the future. You become your own source of strength, and that strength runs out fast, but it doesn't have to be that way. Letting go of the illusion of control isn't giving up, it's waking up. It's saying, God, I acknowledge that I don't have the power to see the whole picture. I can't predict the twists and turns, but I believe you can, and I believe you love me enough to guide me, even when I don't understand. When we start to live this way, something changes. We stop grasping for control, and we start growing in trust. And when trust increases, anxiety decreases, not because the problems disappear, but because your perspective shifts. You begin to say, I don't know what's coming next, but I know who goes before me. You begin to breathe a little deeper, sleep a little better, and stop trying to micromanage life from a place of fear. Do you know what else happens? You start to notice God's hand in places you missed before. You see his fingerprints in the timing, the redirection, the closed doors that once frustrated you. You start to realize that letting go isn't losing control, it's handing it over to someone far more capable, far more loving, and far more aware than you. And that is freedom, not the freedom to avoid every trial, but the freedom to walk through trials without being consumed by them, the freedom to trust that God is not reacting to life with you. He's already made a way. So yes, you can plan, you can prepare, you can make wise decisions, but don't fall into the trap of believing that your peace depends on your ability to control everything. Because the moment you surrender the illusion of control is the moment your faith starts to grow. Not faith in yourself, but faith in a God who is never surprised, never unprepared, and never out of reach. And in that place, when your heart lets go, you begin to experience the peace you've been chasing all along. There's something sacred that happens in the heart when a person finally decides to trust God. Not just in theory, not just with words, but with the whole weight of their life. It's not an easy moment. In fact, it's usually born out of struggle, weariness, and a deep realization that we can't keep doing life on our own terms. Trusting God is more than a verse on a coffee mug. It's more than a song lyric. It's an internal shift, a quiet but powerful surrender of control, anxiety, and self-reliance, and it's in that very surrender that trust is born. You see, trust doesn't begin when everything is going right. It begins when everything feels uncertain. Trust is not formed in the comfort zones of life. It's forged in the tension between what I hoped would happen and what is actually happening. It's when the job falls through, the relationship ends, the door you prayed for stays shut, and you're left with more questions than answers. That's when you learn what it means to trust. But what does trusting God really look like? It means making peace with the unknown. It means believing that God's silence is not His absence. It means holding on to His promises even when your circumstances seem to contradict them. It means standing in a place of confusion and saying, "Lord, I don't understand what you're doing, but I still believe you're good." That's not easy. It's deeply emotional. There are tears involved. There's wrestling. There are moments of doubt, moments when you cry out, "God, where are you?" But through all of that, something unshakable begins to grow, faith, and that faith doesn't just help you survive, it helps you see. Because when you start trusting God, you start seeing differently. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop panicking and start praying. You stop chasing control and start choosing peace. Not because everything is fixed, but because your heart is anchored in something far greater than your circumstances. It's like standing in the middle of a storm, with the wind howling and waves crashing, and still being able to say, "I know who holds my boat." The storm doesn't stop, but your anchor holds. That's what trusting God looks like. Now, this kind of trust doesn't come naturally. It takes time, it takes experience, it takes choosing to believe even when you don't feel like it. And here's something important. Trusting God is not pretending. It's not slapping a smile over your pain and saying, "God's got it," while your heart is breaking. Real trust allows room for grief, for lament, for honesty. God isn't afraid of your questions. He welcomes them. He listens to the cries of your heart and meets you there, in the quiet, in the confusion, in the chaos. But trust also grows when we remind ourselves of who God is. He is faithful, He is kind, He is near, He is wise. He sees the whole picture when we only see a single frame. Every time you look back at a moment in your life when things seem to fall apart, but somehow, in time, came together, you were experiencing the fruit of trusting God. You may not have seen it then, but now, with distance and perspective, you realize that He was working all along. And if He did it before, He can do it again. So when you place your trust in Him, you're not placing it in wishful thinking. You're placing it in a track record of unfailing love. You're saying, "God, I believe you know what's best for me. I believe you have a plan, and even when I don't understand it, I trust you're working it out for good." Trust doesn't remove the storm, but it changes how you face it. Trust doesn't guarantee that things will turn out the way you imagined, but it does guarantee that God will never leave you in the middle of it. So whatever you're walking through today, whatever decision, disappointment, delay, or heartache, remember this: your peace will not come from figuring it all out. It will come from trusting the one who already has. And that trust, it changes everything. It's the gateway to peace, to wisdom, and to strength you didn't know you had. When you place your trust in God, you don't just survive. You begin to live from a deeper, quieter, unshakable place of hope. Because trust, when rooted in Him, never ends in regret. Sometimes we reach a point in life where we've done all we can. We've prayed, we've planned, we've waited, and we've worked ourselves into exhaustion. And yet, things still feel stuck. Silent, heavy, you try to stay strong, but you're quietly running on empty. And if you're honest, there's a part of you that wonders if anything is ever going to change. You might even start to think, maybe this is just how life is now. Maybe I'm meant to carry this forever. But that's not the truth. There's a moment, a turning point, that comes when you not only trust God, but you start to invite Him into the very places you've been keeping to yourself. The fears you don't speak out loud, the wounds you cover up, the dreams you've buried, the disappointments you pretend you've gotten over but haven't, that's the moment when transformation begins, not around you but within you. Because here's what most people don't realize: God doesn't just change your situation, He changes you through the situation. We often ask God to move. We pray, "Lord, fix this, open that door, remove this pain, give me a sign," and sometimes He does. But other times, instead of moving the mountain, He starts moving something in us. He begins to rearrange our hearts, shift our perspective, and deepen our faith in ways we never expected. You may want relief, but God wants renewal. You may want the pressure to stop, but God is using the pressure to purify you. You may want the struggle to end, but God is using it to strengthen your spirit in places you didn't even know were weak. Because when you truly put everything in God's hands, it's not just an act of surrender. It's an invitation for Him to begin a deeper work in your soul. And that work rarely happens in the calm. It happens in the tension, in the waiting, in the moments when you're tempted to go back to your old ways of thinking, reacting, and coping. It's in those moments that God begins to reshape you, slowly, quietly, faithfully. You stop depending on people for validation. You stop chasing answers and start embracing God's presence. You stop needing everything to go your way because you realize His way is better, even when it doesn't look like it at first. And then something beautiful happens. You start to notice small changes in your spirit. You become more patient, more grounded, less reactive. You begin to discern what truly matters and what doesn't. You stop measuring your life by outcomes and start measuring it by obedience. You stop begging God to give you what you want and start asking Him to give you what He wants for you. This is not weakness. It's maturity. It's spiritual growth. It's the kind of deep-rooted strength that no circumstance can take away. And it comes not when everything is going your way, but when your heart is fully aligned with His. This is what happens when you put everything in God's hands and allow Him to do more than fix your life. You allow Him to transform your life. And let me be real with you, it's not always comfortable. Growth rarely is. Transformation often involves shedding old habits, confronting fears, healing from trauma, and letting go of identities you've built around your pain. But every part of the process is sacred. Every step forward is a step toward freedom. Because the more God works in you, the more peace you experience, no matter what's happening around you. That's the evidence. Not always in the breakthrough, but in the becoming. You become someone who doesn't just believe in God, but lives in deep relationship with Him. Someone who doesn't just pray when things fall apart, but walks in constant conversation with the One who holds all things together. So if you're in a season where things feel uncertain or slow, don't assume God is silent. He might be doing His greatest work beneath the surface, where no one sees, but where everything begins. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. You're not forgotten. You're being formed. You're not stuck. You're being strengthened. Let God do what only He can do, not just around you, but inside you. Because when He touches your heart, your perspective, your mindset, everything changes. And that's the power of truly placing your life in His hands. There comes a moment in your journey with God when you look back and begin to see what you couldn't see before. At the time, it felt confusing, maybe even devastating. Things didn't make sense. Prayers went unanswered. Doors closed that you were so sure God had opened. People left. Plans unraveled. And for a while, you carried the quiet ache of disappointment, wondering if maybe you had heard God wrong, or worse, if He had overlooked you. But now, with time, something is shifting. You begin to see the thread of grace running through it all. You start to recognize that God was not absent in those moments. He was orchestrating something greater. You realize that while you were waiting for results, God was building a foundation. While you were asking for comfort, He was giving you character. While you were hoping for relief, He was preparing you for responsibility. That's the beauty of putting everything in God's hands. You start to see results, but not always the kind you expected. The results are deeper than surface-level wins. They're richer than temporary blessings. They're the kind that anchor your soul and change how you live. You become more discerning. You begin to see what's real and what's a distraction. You learn to say no to things you once would have chased, because you know peace isn't found in everything that sparkles. You no longer measure your life by how fast things happen, but by how faithful God has been through it all. You start to live from a place of quiet confidence, not in yourself, but in the one who has never failed you. And do you know what else you start to see? Fruit. Not just external blessings, but internal transformation. That's the real result of surrender. Your joy deepens, not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer trying to control everything. Your patience expands, not because life got easier, but because your soul isn't as restless. Your strength grows, not in loud, flashy ways, but in silent, steady endurance. The kind of strength that gets you up each day, even when you feel like giving up. The kind of strength that others notice without you saying a word. When you put things in God's hands, He doesn't just solve your problems. He changes who you are in the process. And when you change, the way you see life changes. What once would have shaken you now teaches you. What once would have frustrated you now humbles you. What once felt like rejection now reveals itself as redirection. And suddenly, you don't feel the same pressure to force outcomes, because you know that what is for you will never miss you, not when God is the one leading. You find peace in closed doors. You find beauty in delays. You find wisdom in waiting, because God, in His timing, reveals what He was doing all along. Sometimes He restores relationships you thought were lost. Sometimes He replaces what was broken with something better. And other times, the result is simply a heart that trusts more, worries less, and lives with a deeper awareness of His presence. That alone is a miracle. Let's not miss that. Because while we often look for big, visible answers, financial breakthroughs, healed bodies, opportunities unlocked, God is also in the quiet victories. The peace you feel in a storm, that's a result. The clarity you gain after confusion, that's a result. The forgiveness you extend when you were tempted to hold a grudge, that's a result. These are not small things. They are the kind of victories that build a life of depth, maturity, and purpose. And over time, the results start to multiply, not because life gets easier, but because your trust gets deeper. Not because you never face battles, but because you've learned where to place them, in God's hands. And in those hands, nothing is wasted, no tear, no loss, no waiting season. He uses all of it, shaping your story with more wisdom, grace, and strength than you could ever manufacture on your own. So yes, you'll see results. But more than that, you'll see God. The little things in the long stretches in the in-between places. And when you start to see Him, truly see Him, that's when everything changes. Because a life placed in God's hands never stays the same. It always grows. It always bears fruit. It always leads to peace, purpose, and a testimony that no one can take away. There is a moment in every believer's journey where the evidence becomes undeniable. God was working all along. He wasn't far. He wasn't distracted. He wasn't punishing you or withholding something good from you. He was shaping something deeper in you. And now, when you look back, you don't just see what changed around you. You see what changed within you. That's when you realize God is faithful every single time. You see, one of the most powerful outcomes of putting everything in God's hands is not just the peace you feel while waiting or the strength you find to endure. It's the testimony that begins to unfold. A story that could only be written by the hands of a loving and sovereign God. And the more you trust Him, the more that story begins to speak. not just to your own soul, but to others around you. Because what God does in you doesn't stay private forever. Eventually it spills over. It becomes visible in the way you carry yourself, in the way you treat others, in the way you speak, forgive, hope, serve, and love. When you've walked through deep waters with God and come out on the other side, you no longer talk about faith as theory. You speak from experience, and that experience carries weight. It carries healing. It carries hope. Your life becomes proof that placing everything in God's hands doesn't lead to loss. It leads to redemption. Yes, it may come through brokenness. Yes, it may come through unanswered questions and painful goodbyes. But somehow, in His grace, God uses it all, and the final outcome, it is always more beautiful than you imagine, even if it looks different than you planned. The kind of peace you now walk in didn't come cheap. It was born through battles. It was built through nights of wrestling, through seasons where you cried out and heard nothing, through moments where all you had was a whisper of hope, but you held onto it anyway. And now that whisper has grown into a quiet, unshakable knowing. God keeps His promises. You've learned to stop measuring God's love by your current circumstances. You now measure His faithfulness by how far He's brought you. And you've learned to recognize the results that really matter. Not just the blessings you can count, but the faith you now carry, the heart that's more tender, the spirit that's more grounded, the wisdom that only comes through walking through fire with God and discovering that He never once left your side. That's the final and most powerful outcome, a changed life that reflects God's goodness. It's not loud. It doesn't have to be. It's not about standing on stages or proving anything. It's about the quiet strength of someone who knows what it means to lean not on their own understanding, but to acknowledge God in all their ways, and to see Him direct their path again and again. It's the smile on your face when circumstances haven't changed, but your heart has. It's the calm in your spirit when others panic, because you know the one who holds the future. It's the gentle confidence that says, I may not know what's next, but I know I'll be okay because God is with me. And you know what else? People notice. They see the peace in your eyes. They feel the grace in your words. They hear the hope in your story. And without realizing it, your life begins to point others to the one who carried you. The results of surrender don't just change you. They ripple outward. Your life becomes a living invitation to trust God more fully. So, don't be afraid to tell your story. Don't be afraid to say, this is where I was, and this is what God has done. Because someone else is standing where you once stood, confused, afraid, ready to give up, and your journey may be the reminder they need that God is not done, that He sees, that He cares, that placing it all in His hands is not the end. It's the beginning of something sacred. So yes, trust God, give it all to Him, watch how He moves, but most of all, remember what He's done, because in remembering, you will carry strength into the future, and in telling it, you'll help someone else believe again. That's the true result. A life that reflects the love, the power, and the faithfulness of a God who never fails. A life that says, without needing to shout, I put everything in God's hands, and He gave me more than I ever imagined.